walked into that burned shack at the edge of town, and what I found changed everything I thought I knew about my life. My name is Jacob Stone. I'm 42 years old, and I've lived alone in these mountains for the past 20 years. People in town call me the Mountain Man. They whisper about me when I come down once a month for supplies. They think I'm crazy for choosing to live up here, away from everyone. But they don't know the truth. They don't know why I left. And until 3 days ago, neither did I. Let me start from the beginning. I grew up in Riverside, the small town at the bottom of this mountain. My mother, Sarah Stone, raised me alone. She was a kind woman. Everyone loved her. She worked at the town library and knew every person by name. She baked cookies for the school fundraisers. She helped neighbors when they were sick. When I was 22, my mother died in a car accident. At least, that's what they told me. The sheriff said she drove off the mountain road during a storm. They said it was quick. They said she didn't suffer. I believed them. I had no reason not to. After she died, I couldn't stay in that town anymore. Everything reminded me of her. So I packed my things and moved up the mountain. I built a cabin with my own hands. I learned to hunt, to fish, to survive on my own. The loneliness was better than the pain of remembering. For 20 years, I stayed away. I only went to town when I needed food or tools. I never talked to anyone more than I had to. I became a ghost. But 3 days ago, everything changed. I was hiking through the East Ridge, checking my traps, when I smelled smoke. Not campfire smoke. This was old smoke, the kind that comes from something that burned a long time ago. I followed the smell and found a shack I'd never seen before. It was hidden behind thick trees and rocks. The walls were black with soot. The roof had collapsed in places. It looked like it had burned years ago, and nobody had ever found it. I almost walked away, but something made me go inside. The floor was covered with ash and broken glass. There was an old table, burned black, a chair with only 3 legs, and in the corner, hidden under a pile of burned wood, I saw something that made my heart stop. A metal box. It was rusty and dented, but it had survived the fire. My hands shook as I picked it up. There was a lock, but it was so old that it broke when I twisted it. Inside the box was a diary. The cover was leather, stained with smoke, but still intact. I opened it carefully, afraid it would fall apart in my hands. And then I saw the handwriting. I knew that handwriting. It was my mother's. My breath caught in my throat. My mother's diary, here, in a burned shack in the middle of nowhere. Why? I sat down on the ash-covered floor and started reading. The first entry was dated 30 years ago. I would have been 12 years old. I don't know how much longer I can keep this secret, my mother had written. Every day I see them, and every day I have to pretend I don't know. But I know. God help me. I know what they did. My hands started shaking. What secret? What did she know? I turned the page and kept reading. Entry after entry, my mother wrote about something terrible. Something that happened in Riverside. Something that people wanted to hide. And as I read, I realized something that made my blood run cold. My mother didn't die in an accident. She was killed, and the people who killed her were still living in that town, pretending to be good, honest citizens. I sat in that burned shack for hours, reading every word, and with each page, I learned more about the darkness hiding in Riverside, about the lies, about the evil that wore a friendly face. By the time I finished reading, the sun was setting. I closed the diary and held it against my chest. My mother had died trying to expose the truth, and now after 20 years I finally knew what that truth was. I stood up and walked out of the shack. I looked down the mountain toward the town below. Smoke rose from chimneys. Lights began to flicker on in windows. It looked peaceful, safe, normal. But I knew better now. I knew what was hiding in that town, and I wasn't going to let them get away with it anymore. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my cabin with my mother's diary on the table, a lantern burning beside it. I read through it again, slower this time, making sure I understood everything. The first important entry was from 30 years ago, in the summer. My mother wrote about a man named Thomas Creek. I remembered him. He owned the lumber mill outside town. He was rich, powerful, and everyone respected him. But my mother wrote something different about him. "I saw Thomas Creek today at the mill," she wrote. "He was arguing with David Martinez. I was walking past on my way to return books to Mrs. Henderson, and I heard Thomas shouting. He said, 'You'll keep your mouth shut if you know it's good for you.' David looked terrified. When Thomas saw me, he smiled and waved like nothing happened. But I saw the fear in David's eyes. I remembered David Martinez, too. He worked at the mill. He had a wife and 2 kids. He was a quiet man who kept to himself. A few weeks after my mother wrote that entry, David Martinez disappeared. The sheriff said he ran off, left his family, just vanished one night without a word. But my mother didn't believe that. She wrote about it in her diary. David Martinez didn't run away. I know he didn't. He loved his family too much. Something happened to him, and I think Thomas Creek knows what. I turned the pages and found more entries. My mother started investigating. She talked to David's wife, Anna. She asked questions around town. She went to the mill and looked around. And then, she found something. "I went to the old storage building behind the mill today," she wrote. "The door was locked, but I looked through a crack in the wall. I saw something that made my stomach turn. There were barrels inside, big metal barrels with strange labels. I couldn't read all of it, but I saw the word toxic and a skull symbol. Why would Thomas Creek have toxic chemicals at a lumber mill?" My mother kept investigating. She discovered that Thomas Creek was dumping toxic waste on his property. He was being paid by companies from the city to dispose of their chemicals illegally. Instead of paying for proper disposal, he buried the barrels on his land and in the forest around the mill. It was cheaper, and it made him rich, but it was poisoning the land, poisoning the water, poisoning the people. "I talked to Dr. Harrison today," my mother wrote a month later. "I asked him if he'd noticed anything strange. More people getting sick. He looked at me carefully and then closed his office door. He told me that in the past 5 years, there's been an increase in cancer cases, especially in families who live near the mill or downstream from it. He said he reported it to the health department, but nothing happened. He seemed scared." Dr. Harrison died 2 years after my mother wrote that entry. "Heart attack," they said. But reading my mother's diary, I wondered if it was really a heart attack. My mother kept digging. She found out that Thomas Creek wasn't working alone. The sheriff, Robert Coleman, knew about the dumping. So did the mayor, Frank Bishop. They were all being paid to keep quiet. David Martinez found out about the toxic dumping. He threatened to report it, and that's why he disappeared. "I'm scared," my mother wrote. "I found David's truck today. It was hidden in a ravine off Old Mill Road, covered with branches. Someone tried to hide it. I wanted to call the state police, but I don't know who I can trust. If the sheriff is involved, he could make evidence disappear. He could make me disappear, too." My hands clenched into fists as I read those words. My mother was afraid. She knew she was in danger. But she didn't stop. She kept gathering evidence. She took photos of the barrels. She made copies of documents she found. She talked to people who had gotten sick. And then, one entry made my heart stop. "Jacob asked me today why I've been so distracted. He's such a sweet boy, only 12 years old, and he's already so smart and kind. I wanted to tell him everything, but I can't. I can't put him in danger. If something happens to me, I need him to be safe. I need him to grow up and live a good life." I've written everything down in this diary. I've hidden copies of the evidence in places where they won't be found. Someday, if Jacob ever needs to know the truth, he'll be able to find it. Tears filled my eyes. My mother was protecting me. Even while she was investigating something dangerous, even while she was scared, she was thinking about me. I wiped my eyes and kept reading. The entries became more urgent. My mother was planning to go to the state police. She had everything ready: photos, documents, witness statements. But she never made it. The last entry in the diary was dated 1 week before she died. "Tomorrow, I'm driving to the state capitol. I have everything I need to expose them. Thomas Creek, Sheriff Coleman, Mayor Bishop, all of them. They've been poisoning this town for years, and it's going to stop. I'm scared, but I have to do this. For David. For all the families who are sick. For Jacob's future. I have to do what's right. That was the last thing she ever wrote. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my table, staring at the diary, my mind racing. My mother was murdered. I was sure of it now. She was going to expose the truth, and they killed her to stop her. They made it look like an accident, a tragic car crash on a rainy night. Everyone believed it, even me. But it wasn't an accident. As the sun rose, I made a decision. I was going down to that town. I was going to finish what my mother started. I was going to find the evidence she hid, and I was going to make sure everyone knew the truth. I packed my bag with supplies. I put the diary in a waterproof pouch and strapped it to my chest. I wasn't going to let it out of my sight. Then I started the long walk down the mountain. It took me 3 hours to reach Riverside. As I walked through the forest, I thought about the last time I'd really looked at this town. It had been 20 years since I left. I'd come back for supplies, but I never stayed long. I never talked to anyone. I never looked around. Now, as I reached the edge of town, I stopped and stared. Riverside looked almost the same as I remembered. Main Street ran through the center, lined with small shops. There was Miller's General Store, where I bought my supplies. The Riverside Diner, where people gathered for coffee and gossip. The library, where my mother used to work. But something felt different. Or maybe I was different. Now I was looking at this town through new eyes. Eyes that saw the darkness underneath the normal appearance. I walked down Main Street. People stared at me. I knew I looked rough. Long hair, thick beard, clothes worn from mountain living. I looked like exactly what I was. A man who'd been living alone in the wilderness for 20 years. Old Mrs. Patterson gasped when she saw me. "Jacob Stone? Is that you?" I nodded but didn't stop walking. "My goodness," she said to a friend. "I haven't seen him in years." Poor boy. Lost his mother so young. If only she knew the truth. I walked past the diner. Through the window I saw people eating breakfast, laughing, talking, living their normal lives. Did any of them know what had happened? Did any of them suspect? I kept walking until I reached the lumber mill on the edge of town. It looked run down now. The sign was faded. The parking lot had weeds growing through the cracks. Only 2 trucks were parked there. According to my mother's diary, this was where it all started. This was where Thomas Creek dumped the toxic chemicals. This was where David Martinez discovered the truth. I walked around the building, staying in the shadows. The main building was locked, but I found the old storage shed my mother had written about. The door was hanging off its hinges now. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The shed was empty. No barrels, no chemicals, nothing. But the floor was stained. Dark patches covered the concrete, and the smell, even after all these years, there was a chemical smell in the air that made my nose burn. They'd moved the evidence, probably years ago, right after my mother died. But they couldn't erase everything. The stains remained, the smell remained, the poison in the ground remained. I took photos with the old camera I'd brought. Then I left the shed and walked back toward town. I needed to find the people my mother had written about. I needed to know if they were still here, still pretending, still hiding the truth. At the library, I asked to use the computer. The young librarian looked at me strangely but nodded. I searched for Thomas Creek. What I found made my jaw clench. Thomas Creek was dead. He'd died 10 years ago, rich and respected until the end. His obituary called him a pillar of the community, a generous man who created jobs and helped families. They had no idea what he really was. Sheriff Robert Coleman was retired now. He lived in a big house on Maple Street, probably bought with the money he'd been paid to cover up the crimes. Mayor Frank Bishop had died 5 years ago, heart attack. But there were others. My mother's diary mentioned other names, people who knew, people who helped cover it up. And some of them were still here. I left the library and walked to the diner. I needed food and I needed to listen. Small-town diners were where people talked, where gossip spread, where secrets sometimes slipped out. I sat at the counter and ordered coffee and eggs. The waitress was young, probably not even born when my mother died. She smiled at me. "You're not from around here, are you?" "I used to be," I said. "A long time ago." "Well, welcome back," she said cheerfully. "Riverside's a nice, quiet town. Nothing ever happens here." I almost laughed. Nothing ever happens. If only she knew. After I finished eating, I asked the waitress where Maple Street was. She gave me directions with that same cheerful smile. I walked through the residential part of town. Nice houses with neat lawns, children's bicycles in driveways, American flags hanging from porches. It all looked so innocent. I found the house easily. It was the biggest one on the street. 2 stories, white with blue shutters, a wide porch with rocking chairs. A new truck sat in the driveway. I stood across the street for a moment, staring at that house. The man who lived there had helped cover up my mother's murder. He'd been paid to look the other way while people were poisoned. And he'd retired here, comfortable and safe, while my mother was dead. Anger burned in my chest, but I pushed it down. I needed to be smart. I needed to be calm. I walked up to the front door and knocked. After a moment, I heard heavy footsteps. The door opened, and I saw him. Robert Coleman, the former sheriff. He was old now. His hair was completely white. His face was wrinkled and weathered, but his eyes were still sharp, still watching. Still the eyes of a man who'd spent his life keeping secrets. He looked at me with confusion. "Can I help you?" "Sheriff Coleman?" I said. "Former sheriff," he corrected. "I've been retired for 15 years. Who are you?" "Jacob Stone." His face went pale. Actually pale. The color drained right out of his cheeks, and his hand tightened on the doorframe. "Jacob Stone," he repeated slowly. "Sarah's boy." "That's right." He stared at me for a long moment. I could see his mind working, calculating, wondering why I was here after all these years. "I heard you'd gone up the mountain," he said carefully. "Became some kind of hermit." "That's right. So, why are you here now?" I pulled the diary out of my bag. I held it up so he could see it. His eyes widened. He recognized it immediately. "I found my mother's diary," I said quietly, "in a burned shack up on the East Ridge. She wrote about a lot of interesting things. About toxic chemicals. About David Martinez. About you." Robert Coleman's jaw clenched. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he stepped back from the door. "You'd better come inside." I followed him into the house. It was nice inside. Expensive furniture, flat-screen TV, photos of grandchildren on the walls. This was the house that dirty money built. He led me to the living room and sat down heavily in an armchair. He suddenly looked very old and very tired. "How much do you know?" he asked. "I know Thomas Creek was dumping toxic waste. I know David Martinez found out and disappeared. I know you and the mayor helped cover it up. And I know my mother was killed because she was going to expose all of you." He closed his eyes. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that." "Which part? The poisoning? The murder? My mother's death?" "Your mother," he said quietly. "Sarah was a good woman. I never wanted. I tried to warn her. I told her to stop asking questions. I told her it was dangerous. But she didn't stop. No, she didn't." He opened his eyes and looked at me. "Your mother was stubborn. Once she believed something was wrong, she wouldn't let it go. She kept digging. She kept finding evidence. Thomas Creek was panicking. The mayor was panicking. They said we had to stop her." "So you killed her?" "No." He sat forward, his face desperate. "I didn't kill her. I swear I didn't. I wasn't even there that night. I didn't know they were going to. I thought they were just going to scare her, make her back off. But they didn't scare her. They killed her." He put his face in his hands. "When I got the call that night, when they told me there'd been an accident on Mountain Road, I knew. I knew what had really happened. But by then it was too late. She was already gone." "Who did it?" I asked. My voice was cold, hard. "Who actually killed my mother?" Robert Coleman looked up at me with tears in his eyes. "Thomas Creek's son, Marcus. He and 2 of his guys from the mill. They forced her car off the road, made it look like she lost control in the storm. Marcus Creek. I remembered him vaguely. A mean guy who used to bully people in town. He worked for his father at the mill. Where is he now? I asked. He's still here, lives in his father's old house on River Road, runs what's left of the mill. I stood up. I'm going to the state police. I'm going to tell them everything. About the dumping, about David Martinez, about my mother. All of it. Robert Coleman nodded slowly. I know. I've been waiting for this day for 20 years. I've been waiting for someone to finally expose the truth. You could have done it yourself, I said bitterly. You knew what happened. You could have told the truth. I was a coward, he said simply. They paid me well to keep quiet, and I was scared. Thomas Creek was a powerful man. He could ruin lives. He could make people disappear. I told myself I was protecting my own family, but really, I was just protecting myself. He stood up and walked to a desk in the corner. He opened a drawer and pulled out a folder. This is everything I kept, he said, handing it to me. Photos, reports, notes. I couldn't bring myself to destroy it. Maybe part of me always hoped someone would come asking questions. Maybe part of me wanted the truth to come out. I took the folder. This doesn't make up for what you did. I know, he said quietly. Nothing can make up for it. But maybe it can help bring justice for your mother. I left Robert Coleman's house with the folder tucked under my arm. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from rage. Marcus Creek. He was the one who actually killed my mother. He and his men forced her car off that mountain road. They murdered her and made it look like an accident. And he was still here, still living free, still pretending everything was normal. I walked to River Road. It was on the nice side of town, where the wealthy families lived. Thomas Creek's old house was easy to find. It was a massive 2-story home with a wide lawn and a circular driveway. A new pickup truck sat in front. The vanity plate read, Creek 1. I walked up to the front door and pounded on it with my fist. After a moment, the door opened. A large man stood there. He was in his 50s, with a thick neck and cold eyes. He wore an expensive polo shirt and khaki pants. He looked like a successful businessman. But I knew what he really was. Marcus Creek? I said. Who's asking? His voice was rough, suspicious. Jacob Stone, Sarah Stone's son. His expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in his eyes. Recognition. Maybe guilt. Maybe just calculation. I don't know any Sarah Stone, he said. Yes, you do. 20 years ago, you forced her car off Mountain Road. You killed her. Now his expression changed. His eyes went hard, dangerous. I think you'd better leave, he said. Before you say something you'll regret. I found her diary, I continued. She wrote everything down. About your father's illegal dumping, about David Martinez, about how she was going to expose all of you, and I know you killed her to stop her. Marcus stepped out onto the porch, closing the door behind him. He was bigger than me, taller, heavier, used to intimidating people. You need to be very careful, he said quietly. Making accusations like that can get a man in trouble. I'm not scared of you. Maybe you should be. He moved closer. Your mother wasn't scared either. Look what happened to her. That was it. That was all I needed to hear. He'd basically admitted it, confirmed what I already knew. I have evidence, I said. Photos, documents, witness statements, and I'm taking it to the state police. Everyone's going to know what you did, what your father did, all of it. For the first time, Marcus looked worried. That evidence is 20 years old. Even if you have something, it doesn't prove anything now. Robert Coleman gave me his files. He kept everything, including his notes from the night my mother died, including the reports that were never filed, including photos of the crime scene that show it wasn't an accident. Marcus's face went red. Coleman gave you files? That old fool. He's ready to testify. He's ready to tell the truth about everything. No one will believe him. He's an old man. Senile, probably. Maybe. But they'll believe the physical evidence, the toxic waste buried on your property. I'm sure the State Environmental Agency would love to test the soil around your mill, see what they find. Marcus grabbed my shirt. You listen to me, you mountain trash. You come into my town, making threats, stirring up old history that everyone's forgotten. You think you're some kind of hero? You're nothing, just like your mother was nothing. I grabbed his wrist and twisted it hard. He grunted in pain and let go of my shirt. Don't touch me, I said, and don't ever talk about my mother again. He stepped back, rubbing his wrist, his face twisted with rage. You're making a big mistake. You should have stayed up on that mountain, away from things that don't concern you. This concerns me more than anyone. She was my mother, and you killed her. I didn't kill anyone, he said quickly. Too quickly. Your mother died in an accident. Everyone knows that. Everyone believed a lie, but not anymore. A woman appeared in the doorway. She was younger than Marcus, well-dressed, with perfectly styled hair. Marcus? Who is this? Nobody, Marcus said. He was just leaving. I'm Jacob Stone, I said to her. I'm here about my mother, Sarah Stone. Your husband murdered her 20 years ago. The woman's eyes widened. She looked at Marcus. What is he talking about? He's crazy, Marcus said. Don't listen to him. I have proof, I said. He forced her car off Mountain Road because she found out about the illegal toxic dumping his father was doing. She was going to expose them, so they killed her. Get out, Marcus said. Get out now, or I'm calling the police. Go ahead, call them. I'm going to the state police anyway. They'll be very interested in everything I have to tell them. I turned and walked away. Behind me, I heard the woman's voice, high and upset, asking Marcus what was going on. I heard him trying to calm her down, lying to her just like his father had lied to the whole town. But the lies were going to end. I walked back to Main Street. I needed to find a phone. I needed to call the state police. This had gone on long enough. But as I reached the town square, I saw something that made me stop. There was a memorial in the center of the square, a small park with benches and flowers. And in the middle of it was a stone monument. I walked closer and read the inscription, "In memory of Sarah Stone, beloved librarian and friend. Her kindness and dedication to our community will never be forgotten." They'd built a memorial for her. The same people who'd helped cover up her murder had built a memorial, pretending to honor her memory. The hypocrisy made me sick, but it also made me more determined. My mother deserved better than a lying monument. She deserved justice, and I was going to make sure she got it. I found a payphone outside Miller's General Store. Yes, they still had payphones in this small town. I pulled out the coins I'd brought and dialed the number for the state police. A woman answered. State Police, Central Division. How can I help you? I need to report a murder, I said, and illegal toxic waste dumping. It happened 20 years ago, but I have new evidence. There was a pause. Sir, can you tell me your name and location? My name is Jacob Stone. I'm in Riverside. My mother, Sarah Stone, was murdered 20 years ago. The local authorities covered it up. I have her diary, photographs, and documents that prove it. Please hold, sir. I'm transferring you to a detective. The phone clicked. Music played for a moment. Then a man's voice came on the line. This is Detective Barnes. You said you have evidence of a murder? I told him everything. About my mother's diary, about the toxic dumping, about David Martinez, about how the sheriff, the mayor, and Thomas Creek had worked together to hide the crimes, about how my mother was killed when she tried to expose them. Detective Barnes listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. That's a serious accusation, Mr. Stone, he said. Do you really have evidence to support all of this? Yes. I have my mother's diary with dated entries. I have files from the former sheriff that were never officially reported. I have photographs of the illegal waste site, and I know where more evidence is buried. Where are you right now? At a payphone in Riverside. Can you stay there? I'm sending officers to meet you. We'll need to see this evidence and take your statement. How long will it take? About an hour. Don't go anywhere. And Mr. Stone, if what you're saying is true, you may be in danger. The people involved might try to stop you. Let them try, I said. I hung up and leaned against the phone booth. An hour. I just had to wait 1 hour, and then the truth would finally come out. But Detective Barnes was right. If Marcus Creek found out I'd called the state police, he might try something. I needed to be careful. I decided to go back to the library. It was a public place, safe, and it felt right to wait there, in the building where my mother had worked, where she'd helped so many people. The young librarian looked up when I entered. Back again? Is it okay if I wait here for a while? Of course. Make yourself comfortable. I sat at a table near the window where I could watch the street. I kept the diary and the folders with me. I wasn't letting them out of my sight. As I waited, I looked around the library. I remembered coming here as a kid. My mother would be working at the front desk, stamping books, helping people find what they needed. She'd always smile when she saw me come in after school. "Do you need help with your homework, sweetheart?" she'd ask. "No, Mom. I just wanted to see you." She'd ruffle my hair and tell me there were fresh cookies in her bag. I missed her so much. Even after 20 years, the pain was still there. But now, it was mixed with something else: anger and determination. The library door opened. I tensed, ready for trouble. But it was just an old woman returning books. She smiled at the librarian and chatted for a moment before leaving. I relaxed slightly. Then I noticed something. On the wall near the front desk was a photo. It showed the library staff from years ago, and there in the center was my mother. She looked so young, so happy. She had her arm around another woman, both of them smiling at the camera. I stood up and walked closer. The photo was labeled, "Library Staff 2005. 2005. That was the year my mother died. I stared at her face. She had no idea what was coming. She had no idea that in a few months, she'd be dead. "That's from before my time," the young librarian said, noticing what I was looking at. "But Mrs. Patterson talks about Sarah Stone all the time. She says Sarah was the best librarian this town ever had." "She was my mother," I said quietly. The librarian's eyes widened. "Oh, you're Jacob Stone. Mrs. Patterson mentioned you. I'm so sorry about your mother. That must have been awful." It was, but I'm going to make sure people know the truth about what really happened to her. Before the librarian could ask what I meant, I saw a police car pull up outside. But it wasn't a state police car. It was a local Riverside police car. Two officers got out and walked toward the library. My stomach tightened. I hadn't called the local police. I'd specifically called the state police because I didn't know if the local department was still corrupt. The officers entered the library. They looked around and then spotted me. "Jacob Stone?" one of them asked. "That's me. We need you to come with us." "Why? I didn't do anything." "Marcus Creek filed a complaint. Says you trespassed on his property and threatened him. We need to take you in for questioning." This was it. This was Marcus trying to stop me before the state police arrived. "I'm not going anywhere," I said. "I'm waiting for the state police. I called them about an hour ago." The officers looked at each other. Then the first one stepped closer. "Sir, you need to come with us. Now." His hand moved to his belt, to his handcuffs, and I realized I had a choice to make. "I know what you're doing," I said to the officers. "Marcus Creek called you because he's scared. He knows I have evidence that proves he murdered my mother. He's trying to stop me before the truth comes out." The first officer, whose name tag read Miller, shook his head. "Mr. Stone, I don't know anything about that. I just know we got a complaint that you threatened someone. We need to take you in." "Then you can wait," I said firmly. "State police detectives are on their way here right now. They're coming to collect evidence about crimes that happened 20 years ago. Crimes that were covered up by the people running this town." The second officer, younger than Miller, looked uncomfortable. "What crimes?" "Illegal toxic waste dumping, the murder of David Martinez, the murder of my mother, Sarah Stone. All covered up by Thomas Creek, Sheriff Coleman, and Mayor Bishop." Officer Miller's expression hardened. "That's crazy talk. Thomas Creek was a respected businessman." "Thomas Creek was a criminal, and his son Marcus killed my mother because she was going to expose him." "You're making serious accusations," Miller said. "Accusations that could get you in trouble." "I have evidence. Photographs, documents, my mother's diary, former Sheriff Coleman's files. It's all here." I gestured to the folders on the table. The young officer stepped closer and looked at the folders. "Can I see?" "No," Miller said sharply. "We're not here to look at evidence. We're here to bring him in." But the young officer had already picked up one of the folders. He opened it and started reading. His eyes widened. "Officer Davis, put that down," Miller ordered. "Sir, you need to see this. These are photos of toxic waste barrels, and these look like official reports that were never filed." Miller's jaw clenched. He walked over and looked at the documents. For a moment, he was quiet. "Where did you get this?" he finally asked me. "From Robert Coleman. He kept copies of everything. He couldn't destroy the evidence, even though he was paid to cover it up." Miller closed the folder slowly. I could see him thinking, calculating, trying to decide what to do. "Look," I said, "I know you're just doing your job, but this is bigger than a complaint from Marcus Creek. This is about murder, about people being poisoned, about a cover-up that's lasted 20 years. The state police are coming. You can either help me, or you can try to stop me and end up being part of the cover-up." Officer Davis looked at Miller. "Sir, if what he's saying is true, we don't know if it's true," Miller interrupted, but his voice was less certain now. "You can read it all," I said. "Read my mother's diary. Read Coleman's files. Then tell me if you think I'm lying." Miller stared at me for a long moment. Then he sat down at the table. "Show me." I opened my mother's diary and showed him the entries about Thomas Creek, about David Martinez, about the toxic dumping. Then I showed him Coleman's files, the photos, the reports that were never officially recorded. Officer Davis read over Miller's shoulder. Both men were silent. Finally, Miller looked up at me. His face was pale. This is real?" "Every word." "My grandfather got sick," Davis said quietly. "Died of cancer when I was 10. He lived downstream from the mill his whole life. We never knew why he got sick. The doctor said it just happens sometimes." "It wasn't random," I said. "It was the chemicals in the water. Thomas Creek poisoned the land and people got sick. Some of them died, and everyone who knew about it kept quiet because they were being paid." Miller stood up and walked to the window. He stood there for a moment, looking out at the town. Then he turned back to me. "The state police are really coming? Should be here any minute." He nodded slowly. "Okay, we'll wait with you. And when they get here, we'll make sure you're safe and that they get all the evidence." "What about Marcus Creek's complaint?" I asked. "I'll handle Marcus Creek," Miller said grimly. "If what's in these files is true, he's got bigger problems than a trespassing complaint." We waited. The librarian brought us coffee. She kept looking at us nervously, probably wondering what was happening, but she didn't ask questions. 15 minutes later, 2 unmarked cars pulled up outside. 4 people in plain clothes got out. State police detectives. I stood up and gathered the folders. Detective Barnes was the first one through the door. He was a tall man in his 50s with gray hair and sharp eyes. He looked at the 2 local officers, then at me. "Jacob Stone? That's me. I'm Detective Barnes. This is Detective Rodriguez, and these are Officers Chen and Walsh. We're here about your call." "I have everything right here," I said, holding up the folders and the diary. My mother's diary, former Sheriff Coleman's files, and photographs of the illegal waste site. Barnes took the materials carefully. He opened the diary and read a few pages. His expression grew serious. "This is substantial," he said. "We're going to need to take formal statements, and we'll need to interview several people, including Robert Coleman and Marcus Creek." "Marcus Creek is dangerous," Officer Miller said. "He filed a false complaint to try to bring Mr. Stone in before you arrived. I think he knew this was coming." Barnes nodded. "We'll handle Mr. Creek. Right now, I need Mr. Stone to come with us to give a full statement. Can you do that?" "Yes," I said. "I'll tell you everything." "Good. Let's go." We went to the state police barracks in the next county. It took about 45 minutes to drive there. I rode with Detective Barnes and Detective Rodriguez. They asked me questions the whole way, and I answered every one. When we arrived, they took me to an interview room. It had a table, some chairs, and a recording device. "We're going to record this," Barnes explained. Everything you say will be documented. Take your time and tell us everything from the beginning. And so I did. I told them about growing up in Riverside, about my mother working at the library, about how she died when I was 22, and how everyone said it was an accident. I told them about leaving town and living alone on the mountain for 20 years. I told them about finding the burned shack and discovering my mother's diary inside. Then I went through the diary, page by page, explaining what my mother had discovered. The illegal dumping, David Martinez's disappearance, the cover-up involving Sheriff Coleman, Mayor Bishop, and Thomas Creek. I told them about confronting Robert Coleman and how he'd admitted everything, how he'd given me his files. I told them about Marcus Creek and how he'd basically admitted to killing my mother. The detectives listened to everything. They took notes. They asked clarifying questions. They examined every piece of evidence carefully. After 3 hours, Barnes sat back in his chair. "This is one of the most detailed cases I've ever seen," he said. "Your mother was thorough. She documented everything." "She was a librarian," I said. "She knew how to research, how to organize information." "She was also very brave," Rodriguez added. "She knew she was putting herself in danger, but she kept going." "That was my mother," I said quietly. "Once she believed something was right, nothing could stop her." Barnes nodded. "Okay, here's what's going to happen. We're opening a full investigation. We'll be interviewing Robert Coleman, Marcus Creek, and anyone else who might have been involved. We'll also be bringing in the State Environmental Agency to test the soil and water around the old mill site." "What about David Martinez?" I asked. "My mother thought he was murdered. His family deserves to know what happened to him." "We'll investigate that too," Barnes promised. "If there's evidence that he was killed, we'll find it." "How long will this take?" "Investigations like this can take months, maybe longer. We're talking about crimes that happened 20 years ago. Evidence has been hidden or destroyed. Witnesses might not want to talk. It's going to be complicated. But you will get justice for my mother." Barnes looked at me directly. "I can't promise you what the outcome will be, but I promise you that we will investigate thoroughly. We will follow every lead. And if there's enough evidence to bring charges, we will." That was all I could ask for. They let me go around dinner time. Officer Miller had waited and offered to drive me back to Riverside. On the drive back, he was quiet for a while. Then he said, "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For trying to bring you in earlier, for not believing you at first. I grew up in this town. I always thought it was a good place. Safe. Honest. Finding out that people I respected were involved in something like this, it's hard." "I understand," I said. "I thought the same thing until I read my mother's diary." "What are you going to do now?" he asked. "I don't know. Wait for the investigation, I guess. Make sure they follow through. Will you stay in town?" I thought about that. Maybe. At least for a while. I can't go back to living on the mountain and pretending none of this happened. Not anymore. When we got back to Riverside, it was dark. Miller dropped me off at the small motel on the edge of town. "If you need anything," he said, "call the station. Ask for me. I'll help however I can." "Thank you." I checked into the motel. The room was small and plain, but it was clean. I sat on the bed and realized how exhausted I was. I hadn't slept in almost 2 days, but I couldn't sleep yet. I pulled out my mother's diary and read through it one more time. This time, I wasn't reading for evidence. I was reading to remember her, to hear her voice and the words she'd written. "Jacob is growing up so fast," she'd written when I was 14. "He's such a good boy, kind and smart. I hope he always stays that way. I hope the world doesn't make him hard or bitter." Tears ran down my face. "I'm sorry, Mom," I whispered. "I did become hard. I became bitter. I hid from the world for 20 years because losing you hurt too much. But I'm not hiding anymore. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you did, how brave you were, how you died trying to do the right thing." I closed the diary and held it against my chest. Then I finally let myself sleep. The next morning, I woke to loud knocking on my door. I sat up, confused and disoriented. The knocking came again, more urgent. I opened the door and found Officer Davis standing there. He looked upset. "Mr. Stone, you need to come with me." "What happened?" "It's Robert Coleman. Someone broke into his house last night." My stomach dropped. "Is he okay?" Davis's expression was grim. "No, He's dead. I stood in the doorway, frozen. Robert Coleman was dead. How? I managed to ask. Someone broke in through the back door, Davis explained. The neighbors heard a gunshot around midnight. By the time we got there, Coleman was dead. Single gunshot to the chest. Marcus Creek, I said immediately. It had to be him. We don't know that yet, but Detective Barnes wants to talk to you. He's already here from the state police. I grabbed my jacket and followed Davis to his patrol car. We drove to Robert Coleman's house. There were police cars everywhere. Yellow tape blocked off the property. Officers were moving in and out of the house. Detective Barnes was standing on the front lawn talking to someone. When he saw me, he walked over. Mr. Stone, I'm sorry to bring you into this, but we need to ask you some questions. I was at the motel all night, I said. I didn't leave. We know. The motel manager confirmed you checked in around 8 p.m. and didn't leave your room. But I need to know something. When you talked to Coleman yesterday, did he seem scared? Did he mention being threatened? I thought back to our conversation. He seemed relieved, actually, like he'd been carrying a burden for 20 years and was finally ready to let it go. He said he'd been waiting for someone to ask questions. He wanted the truth to come out. Barnes nodded. That matches what we're seeing. Coleman left a note. We found it on his desk. He wrote down everything he remembered about the night your mother died. Names, dates, details. It's like he knew something might happen to him and wanted to make sure the truth was recorded. Can I see it? Barnes hesitated, then pulled out a photocopy from his folder. This is a copy. The original is evidence. I read Coleman's note. It was written in shaky handwriting, like he'd been emotional while writing it. I, Robert Coleman, former sheriff of Riverside, am writing this as a full confession. On the night of October 15, 2005, I received a call from Thomas Creek. He told me there had been an accident on Mountain Road. When I arrived, I found Sarah Stone's car at the bottom of the ravine. I knew immediately it wasn't an accident. The skid marks were wrong. The position of the car was wrong. Everything was wrong. Thomas Creek was there with his son Marcus, and two mill workers named Pete Dawson and Jack Turner. Thomas told me what had happened. Marcus and the others had followed Sarah Stone from town. They forced her off the road. Thomas said it had to be done because Sarah was going to destroy everything. She was going to report the illegal dumping, and it would ruin them all. Thomas offered me money to make sure the investigation went nowhere. He said, if I didn't cooperate, my family would be in danger. I was scared. I had a wife and two young kids, so I took the money. I wrote in my report that Sarah lost control in the rain. I closed the investigation quickly. I've lived with that guilt every day since. I know I can never make up for what I did, but I want the truth on record. Marcus Creek killed Sarah Stone. His father paid me to cover it up, and I was a coward who chose money over justice. If something happens to me, it's because Marcus found out I talked to Sarah's son, but I don't regret it. It's time for the truth to come out. My hands shook as I held the paper. Coleman had written down everything. Names, details, a full confession. This is enough to arrest Marcus Creek, isn't it? I asked. It's strong evidence, Barnes said. Combined with your mother's diary and the other documents, we have a solid case. But there's a problem. What? Marcus Creek is gone. His wife says he left the house last night around 11 p.m. He told her he had to take care of something. He hasn't been back. His truck is missing. We've put out an alert for him, but so far, nothing. So Marcus had run. He'd killed Coleman to silence him, and then fled. He won't get far, I said. He's spent his whole life in this town. He doesn't know how to survive out there. Maybe not, Barnes agreed, but he's desperate. Desperate people can be unpredictable. Officer Miller walked up to us. Detective, we found something. You need to see this. We followed Miller around to the back of the house. There on the back porch was a muddy boot print. We're analyzing it now, Miller said, but it looks like a size 12 work boot. Same kind Marcus Creek wears. Barnes nodded. Good. Get photos of everything. I want a complete evidence log. He turned to me. Mr. Stone, I need you to be careful. Marcus Creek has killed at least twice now. Your mother and Robert Coleman. He's dangerous, and he knows you're the reason all of this is coming out. He might come after you next. Let him try, I said. The anger was back, hot and fierce. I'm not running. I'm not hiding. I'm going to see this through to the end. I understand how you feel, but... No, I interrupted. You don't understand. I've spent 20 years hiding on that mountain. 20 years running from the pain. I'm done running. If Marcus Creek wants to come after me, I'll be waiting. Barnes studied my face for a moment. Then he nodded. Okay, but we're putting protection on you. An officer will be with you at all times until we catch Marcus. Fine. 2 days passed. Marcus Creek was still missing. The state police searched everywhere. His house, the mill, the surrounding forest. Nothing. But the investigation was moving forward. The environmental agency came and tested the soil around the old mill. Just as my mother had suspected, they found high levels of toxic chemicals. The contamination had spread through the groundwater. Houses downstream from the mill had been drinking poisoned water for years. The news spread through Riverside like wildfire. People were angry, scared. They wanted answers. The state police held a press conference. Detective Barnes stood in front of cameras and reporters and explained everything. He talked about the illegal dumping, about David Martinez, about how my mother had discovered the truth and been killed for it, about how local officials had covered it up for 20 years. He held up my mother's diary and said, "Sarah Stone was a hero. She risked her life to expose corruption and protect her community. Because of her courage and the evidence she gathered, we are now able to bring justice." I watched from the back of the room. People turned to look at me. Some of them had tears in their eyes. After the press conference, people came up to me. People who remembered my mother. People who had been her friends. Mrs. Patterson hugged me tightly. "Your mother was the kindest person I ever knew. I'm so sorry for what happened to her, but I'm glad the truth is finally coming out." Others said similar things. They apologized for believing the lie. They thanked me for not giving up. For the first time in 20 years, I felt like I was part of the community again. On the third day, Officer Davis came to my motel room early in the morning. "We found him," he said. "Marcus?" "Yes. He was hiding in an old hunting cabin about 30 miles from here. He surrendered without a fight." Relief washed over me. What happens now? "He's being charged with the murder of Robert Coleman, and the state is reopening the investigation into your mother's death. With Coleman's confession and the other evidence, they're confident they can charge him with that, too." "And David Martinez?" Davis smiled slightly. "We found something yesterday. We were searching the property around the mill, and we found an old, unmarked grave. The remains are being examined now, but we think it might be David Martinez. If it is, we can charge Marcus with that murder, too." I closed my eyes. David Martinez, a man who disappeared 20 years ago, leaving behind a wife and children who never knew what happened to him. Now, they'd finally have answers, finally have closure, just like me. The trial happened 8 months later. I attended every day. I sat in the courtroom and watched as prosecutors presented all the evidence. My mother's diary, Coleman's confession, the environmental reports, testimony from experts and witnesses. Marcus Creek's defense attorney tried to argue that it was all circumstantial, that his client was innocent, but the evidence was too strong. The jury deliberated for only 4 hours. Guilty of murder in the first degree. For my mother, for Robert Coleman, and for David Martinez, whose remains had been positively identified. When the verdict was read, I felt something I hadn't felt in 20 years. Peace. Not happiness, not joy, but peace. A sense that justice had finally been served, that my mother's death hadn't been for nothing. Marcus Creek was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After the trial, I went back to Riverside. But not to leave, to stay. I bought a small house on the edge of town. I started working at the hardware store. I got to know my neighbors. People still called me the mountain man sometimes, but now it was with affection rather than suspicion. The town started healing. The environmental agency cleaned up the contamination around the mill. Families who had gotten sick received compensation. David Martinez's family finally had closure and could properly grieve. And the town built a new memorial for my mother. This time, the inscription told the truth. Sarah Stone, 1963 to 2005, librarian, mother, and hero. She gave her life fighting for truth and justice. May we never forget her courage. I visited that memorial every week. I brought fresh flowers, and I talked to her, telling her about what was happening in the town she'd loved. The library has your picture in the main room now, Mom, I told her one sunny afternoon. And they started a scholarship in your name for students who want to become librarians or journalists, people who want to seek the truth, just like you did. I sat on the bench near the memorial and looked up at the mountain where I'd lived for so long. I thought hiding was the answer, I said. I thought if I stayed away from people, I wouldn't get hurt. But you taught me something, even after all these years. You taught me that the truth matters, that standing up for what's right matters, even when it's hard, even when it's dangerous. The wind rustled through the trees. Somewhere nearby, children were playing. Life was continuing, moving forward. I miss you, I said quietly. I miss you every single day. But I'm not hiding anymore. I'm living. I'm part of this community. And I'm making sure everyone remembers what you did, what you stood for. I stood up and touched the memorial stone gently. Rest easy, Mom. Justice has been served. The truth is out. And I promise I'll keep living the way you would have wanted, with courage, with integrity, with love. I walked back toward town, toward my new life, toward the future. And for the first time since I was 22 years old, I felt truly at home. The truth can be buried, but it can never be destroyed. Standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult or dangerous, is the most important thing we can do. Justice may take time, but it's worth fighting for. And sometimes, the greatest courage is not in hiding from pain, but in facing it and demanding that wrongs be made right.